Okay, good morning. Oh, let me turn this on. Okay, good morning, everyone.
It was on.
It was on. Is this on? There we go. Okay, great. Thank you, everyone, for coming for our next Faith Cafe in our series on spiritual disciplines. My name is Angie Dickens, and here to introduce Rich Henderson, who's going to be leading us today in talking about journaling as a spiritual discipline. And this is part of a series which hopefully you've been able to make some of the other talks we've already had. But this is actually part of a Lenten series within this larger series on spiritual disciplines. Let's talk about discipleship. And spiritual disciplines to develop as disciples of Christ. And following Christ's words and deeds to become more like Christ, draw others to Christ, and transform the world. With that, I will hand it over to Rich, who will talk about how we can use journaling in part of our development.
Good morning, everybody. Good morning. I like being with family. So, if there was a continuum regarding journaling, that on one end, if I had you line up back there, and that side is going to be, yes, I love journaling, I do it all the time. Somewhere in the middle was going to be, oh, it's a good idea, but it's like those other disciplines that I sometimes, occasionally, rarely get around to. And over here was the no, journaling not for me. How many people are over in that corner? Yes, love it. It's a good idea and it's a discipline, but. And no. In case you didn't hear, she said it's all those people out there. Okay, where's the biblical basis for journaling? Who can give me a good scripture reference?
David. As a kid, he was always crying out to the Lord. Okay.
I'll take that. I was actually asking that facetiously, but if you think about it.
He just wrote it in the sand, so it's good.
If we keep at it, we'll take the whole time coming up with it.
All right. If you all would take the journals that you were given, and we're going to just real briefly have each of you write a sentence or two about something you're grateful for. Or for which you are grateful. Okay, I'm going to keep us moving. And by the way, the something we're grateful for, this is Martha's and my practice every night. We have a journal beside our bed, and we get in bed. She pulls out the journal and says, what are two things that we're each grateful for today? So, okay, write down something meaningful that happened this week. Just a sentence or two.
This is like a trick, isn't it? You're tricking us into journaling.
What? Better than tricking you into exercise or running. Wish you could. And how did you feel about that meaningful event? A sentence or two, did it make you joyful, sad, anxious?
spring coming.
Write that down. Lastly, this will be the last one. A prayer, something you want God to answer. Perhaps related to that event or perhaps related to something else. Okay, so how was this last 4 minutes for you guys? What'd you think about that?
It was pretty easy. Never realized it.
Pretty easy, never realized it.
I always thought that, journaling had to be something big, profound.
Profound.
And I don't live a profound life. I just live life.
Other thoughts?
Yeah, I like having a specific task.
So it helped having a specific guideline of what to do at the time. And we're actually going to, in a few minutes, get to, I have several models of thoughts about journaling structure for you guys later. So we'll get to that. Any other comments?
It was good to just have a time to reflect on what was meaningful this week. And yeah, otherwise you can just brush over this.
Right, so you'd actually, if you stop and think and focus and write, as opposed to just breezing through life and missing some of the meaningful things that do happen.
Especially looking for something that you're grateful for is good, especially on very dark days.
Yes.
And you think nothing is good.
There is something particularly helpful about journaling gratitude or expressing it in some way. It doesn't have to be writing, but it's just a really healthy thing for us.
My struggle with journaling has always been feeling like it's going to be a graded essay or something,
Yes.
and just getting outside myself and just writing things, not creating a story arc or anything like that. Just
And we'll talk about that a bit more in a minute. So, what are some of your thoughts about why would one journal? Why would this be something you would think about integrating as a regular discipline into your life? What are some of the whys?
It helps me process
Okay.
things, to try to find answers,
Mm-hmm.
find out what I'm thinking.
Yep.
We tend to forget.
Yes, so it's your memory.
That's what I was going to say, like, you read like the Old Testament, a lot of it is then reminding themselves about how God made it faithful, all of these occasions, and that's essentially their record.
Yeah, throughout the Old Testament, God tells people to remember what I've done, remember my faithfulness. And sometimes it's remembering through oral tradition or it's building stones, but they're memory pieces of God's activity and faithfulness in our life.
secondary audience of your descendants who come across your stuff.
I'm sorry, what was that?
The secondary audience of your descendants who will come across it someday and have a better sense of who you are. I recently came across my Swedish great-grandfather's bullet journal, and it's mostly in broken English and Swedish, but it's great because I know him more than just that very stern picture now.
And we're going to talk about this in a minute too. How public or private is this little book here? I have no intent for any descendants or relatives to ever see what's written in here. Martha has instructions: upon my death, take my box of journals for the last 20 years and burn them. So, Barrett?
I think journaling is just a simple act of writing thoughts is a way way to focus your thoughts on what you're doing and those thoughts themselves, rather than having the thoughts in the back of your mind while you're doing other things and going through the day. The act of writing helps to focus our attentiveness.
Right. So I've decided to approach today not as an expert on journaling that has the broad view, but really to share more of my experience of journaling and what it means in my discipleship and as a tool in my growth with God. So primarily for me, this is for me, and this is for my relationship with God. And it's for me both in the moment and as I look back or look ahead. So in the moment, for me, journaling is my memory. How many of you remember Dale's sermon from last week? It was a really good one. I would not remember it.
It was on a psalm.
It was on a psalm. So what I wrote down in my journal on Monday morning was distress, dissatisfaction, pain, and disappointment with how things are. Turn me to God, to cry out to God in prayer and lament. Oh yeah, that's what his sermon was about. And then it starts to let me reflect and recount and process. But I wouldn't remember that a mere 7 days later. So I need journaling as a memory tool. Secondly, for me, it helps me pay attention. Pay attention to things in my life that would just sort of, I'd skim by them. My response to others have been sharp lately. Too quick, too edgy. These are symptoms. It's time for me to pay attention to the underlying issues. Those issues aren't too hard for me to figure out right now. So I notice it gives me the ability to pay attention. I am being too quick and too sharp with people. Well, that's not the real issue. So I'm paying attention to that and having a chance to go deeper with that issue. For me also, journaling is the intersection or the bringing together of my internal processing and my external processing. I think Martha's really glad that I don't externally process everything. Right? And I'm an external processor. And so this gives me a chance to sort of take that internal processing, what's going on, how do I make sense of this, and that external that I talk about out loud. And this to me feels like that intersection or that nexus of those kinds of processing. Do I see my life as balance or rhythm? When I see life as balance, I'm always on the verge of failure. It's always not quite right. It takes extreme work. What about when I see my life as a rhythm, with things that change over time, as seasons, where there's periods of growth and periods of dormancy? So that's that internal processing and that external processing coming together with my pen on paper. Also, for me, journaling helps direct what I'm learning toward prayer. I was told recently that I might want to think about treating anger like a crying baby. What does it need? With a crying baby, you don't leave the room and close the door. Lord, help me to understand and process my anger. So I'm taking those thoughts, those things that I'm seeing and noticing and processing, and starting to direct that into prayer. That makes sense? So that's in the moment. That's the processing my daily and weekly life rhythm kind of stuff. Once a month, I take my journal and I read back through that last month. And then it helps me get the bigger picture of things that are happening in my life. I reflect over time. And it may be that month or it may be a bigger period of time. So I meet about monthly with a spiritual director, and this is the food for my conversation with him, is I can pay attention and say, oh my gosh, this whole month has been about trying to fix things. You know, and I'm reverting back to that old part of myself, that immature part of myself that wants to control and fix everything. And then he and I can have a conversation about control and fixing. So it helps me notice over a period of time what are consistent or repetitive issues that come up back time and time again. Or it helps me notice what God is up to in my life. Oh my gosh, I hadn't really realized that this theme has been a consistent theme. God must be at work doing something. And then that can help me to thank God for what He's doing, or reorient, or cooperate, or try to deal with those issues in a different way. Sometimes looking back is even bigger picture. A book group I'm in, we read Anne Lamott's most recent book, and she in her book said, this is everything I know about everything, about anything. And so we challenged each other in the book group to say, if you were writing a book about everything you knew, what would your chapter titles be? So that gave me an even broader reflective perspective. So my first chapter title in my book, called Everything I Know, is I'm pretty sure I don't know what I think I know. And my second one is being out of control is better than it seems. And so I just save this page in my journal, and every once in a while I go back and think, what else do I know? What else capsulizes how I see life and how I live life? So for me, it's both being in the moment, processing what's going on in the current affairs of my life. It's looking back and having a reflective period of time and then reorienting. And periodically I have a sense of, well, if God has been doing this over these last months, I wondered what that means about how I cooperate with Him into my future. And so periodically it leads to my, not every year and not with a sense of obligation or duty, but most years I'll sit down at some point in the year and do the State of the Union. And I'll sort of say, what is the state of my being? What has it been over the last period of time? And where do I think God is moving or stirring, or the Spirit is shaking in my life? And so what kinds of things might I want to focus on as I look ahead? Those things come squarely out of my journaling practice. So for a practice that isn't like prayer or Bible study or those things that we see so directly as imperatives through Scripture, this is part of my discipleship toolbox that I would not give up. Sometimes, and this has all been in our private experience, sometimes journaling can have a public sense to it as well. I never intend to have my journals become the great American spiritual biography. Linda, you might. No. That is not my purpose and intent. I don't have a public side of my journaling. Some people do. I've been asking a few people over the last few weeks, well, what about your journaling? What about it? And I had one person, a mother, say, I leave mine out publicly in the house because I want my kids to be able to go in and have access to some of my inner world. And I thought, oh my God, I would never do that. Somebody else said, oh yeah, I want mine compiled and published when I'm dead. And I'm like, that's not me either. But I think CaringBridge is an aspect of journaling that some people have chosen to use to let their lives become public in a way where what God is doing in their own life is not only for their sake, but for the sake of other people as well.
So everybody know what CaringBridge is?
So CaringBridge is a website that many people use when somebody in their circle of friends is ill. And so they post on it just an update, so they're writing one update instead of to their whole world of friends. Barry and Carol use this extensively. Cheryl and Steve used this extensively as they had loved ones dying. So instead of trying to go over and over and over to communicate what was happening and how they were dealing with that, you write it once, and whoever is subscribed to that, or you allow to subscribe to that, can see it. So Steve and Cheryl's writings over that period of time after Steve passed away was actually turned into a book. And so this book, to me, is a gift. It's a gift of Steve and Cheryl deciding that their journaling could be a public offering. Barry's writing a book that I keep encouraging him to write that is similar in that vein. So journaling can have a public aspect if we're willing to open up the doors for people to see into those things. And Cheryl, thank you for you guys opening the door to your experience, because it's been meaningful to me, and I just bought 10 of these, and Martha and I give them to people as they're going through this. So that's my why. Your whys may be different. My whys may be compelling to you, and they may not. I think for many people I've asked, what would you like to be covered in a Faith Cafe about journaling? Everybody goes to barriers. So what are barriers for you all as you think about either continuing this practice or developing this practice? So one we heard earlier was sort of, it's too freeform. I need structure. What are other barriers?
For me, I had journaled for years, and it was really my conversation with God. And then I went to a journaling workshop, and this was given by a woman who expected to pass this on to her children. And so she wrote her reflections on what was going on politically, historically, and so forth. And it just occurred to me that, someone's going to see this. And it shut me down for a long, long time.
So I think one of the big barriers is the sense that somebody else will see it, or privacy. So if you notice, I didn't leave this on the music stand when I came in this morning at 8 o'clock and ran around the church for hours. This does not sit out. So I have my own sense of privacy and protection of this. I don't lock it up. It's not tucked away under the mattress, but it's in private places that are where I only access, and this is mine. And some people do their journaling on a computer and they password protect what they're writing, but I think privacy is a huge issue. And without sort of going to the nth degree about that, I keep this in private places.
That I respect.
That my wife respects. Thank you.
I actually thought when you wrote this that first line was one of the barriers.
It is.
And that's what I was going to say. That's, to me, is my own self-critic, that as I start writing, oh, this is so stupid, or why you shouldn't think that way, or you misspelled that word, or whatever.
So that, I think, is my second most important barrier, is the external, what somebody else going to see or judge me if they wrote it. And then maybe more primary is, how do I judge myself for what I'm writing? And that could be either in, I'm not writing this well enough, it's not eloquently, or those aren't the words, or it could be judging your own thoughts and perceptions that you're writing down. And I think it takes great, great grace to not have self-judgment to have the practice of journaling.
This is the time that I've learned to tell my inner critic to go sit in the corner.
And actually, I think one of the great books or resources for you all on this is called Journaling as a Spiritual Practice. And it's by Helen Shapiro. And today, like I said, it's the rich experience. This is the broad-based, really helpful. She says, start writing and throw away your red pen. Because we all bring that self-critic to what we're writing.
There's a kind of a chicken and egg thing. Sometimes I feel like I want to understand something better before I write it, but other times I'm writing something and it's loose and sloppy, and I later realize, oh, that was helping me to understand something by doing the act of writing.
Yep. So privacy, judging myself, and a lot of us will just sort of never start out, oh, that's not that process. Yeah, it's like, I don't like peas. Well, how do you know you don't like peas unless you try it? Okay. So I think there's also some practicals. So deciding some details about where will I write, when will I do this, what do I write in physically. So I buy the cheapest, ugliest college bookstore journals, because for me, if I got this really nice leather one with the strap that comes around and the magnetic folding thing, I mean, that enhances my sense of this has to be really good or special or different. I can write in a plain old cheap college notebook, and I've done this for 20, 30, 40 years since college, so that's been a while. So 4 decades of writing in cheap notebooks like this, and I can always find the same thing, and I'm never having to make a decision about what's my next journal going to be. And so on. Some people are wired differently, and they like the really nice ones, and great. This is me, just a plain old me. There's a handout, if we could get around quickly.
Sometimes it's helpful to start with a small book because it's not so overwhelming, as a large blank page.
Yeah, you all today have a journal provided for you. There's some over there that are lined. Most of you got lined ones. If some of you want more freedom, you can also take the blank ones, and I got some more of them if we were out. And there's some that just have dots, and so depending on how engineeringly wired you are, you have different journal book options. So I'm not going to go through this in huge detail, but this was just my reflection on different things that I do in my journaling practice. Sometimes I just put my pen down and start writing and just see what comes out. Sometimes I do very specific reflections on what's been going on. So like we did early on today, what's been going on, how am I feeling about it, are there things that I'm learning, and how do I pray about these things? Sometimes it's a gratitude journal. Mark is my evening practice. There's also a daily examine that's a little more directed, but the core of that examine comes down to being thankful, trying to reflect on how have I most cooperated with God, and how have I most worked least cooperatively with God, and where did I experience joy? So there are many versions of the daily examine. You could Google that and get a dozen versions and find one that fits you. I often take what I'm learning in scripture or sermons or things like that and process a little bit in writing. And it could be anything from sort of a typical, some Bible study thoughts to rephrasing or rewriting or paraphrasing the passage. Or my Monday morning journaling practice is to think through the Sunday sermon and my thoughts and takeaways from the Sunday sermon. Journals are often prayer reflections, so often there's pages of prayers, just people or circumstances or situations, and it reminds me to recall those people. And I would say that journaling can also just be creative. I'm a words person. I think in words and I speak in words. Other people are not as word-oriented as I am. And so they may draw. Or I talked to one person that said, at the end of every day, I just write down what color was my day. And then they drew something. Just a quick little sketch that was a reflection of their day as a sketch. Or you could make an emoji of the day. What was my day like in that day? Or writing poetry. So there's a lot of creative expressions of journaling that don't have to be logical, linear reflections like I tend to do. Then on the back, it just says looking back and ahead, and these are some of my practices related to gathering bigger chunks of time, and how do I reflect on those and process those. So I'm always one that says, for me, and I think for most of us, having next steps is helpful if you want to try something. If you're going to learn how to windsurf, you've got to have water and a windsurf board to sail. And you've got to, at some point, stand on that board and give it a whirl. So if journaling is something that you want to develop or redevelop or enhance, you can't do it without trying. So you're going to have to make those decisions about when am I going to write, where am I going to write, what am I going to write in. And so I think for me, if I go to a conference and I come away with, there were 8 amazing truths from this conference, and I walk away without a specific plan, which one of those truths is most important? And what do I have to do about it? And where am I going to start? And when am I going to start? Who's going to keep me accountable with my plan? Then I'm apt to do nothing. So rather than having a bunch of great things that are great thoughts and ideas, I think it's more important to have one specific thought and make a plan of action for it. So I would encourage each of us to think, no, I'm not going to try this, or yes, I will, and if I am. So I'm a weekday journaler. I'm not a weekend journaler. I don't even look at my journal on the weekends, so that's just my practice. And I don't get all 5 weekdays, I get most weekdays. So for me, it would be, okay, Monday morning, in my office, when I first get to work, I'm just going to take 10 minutes and journal. That's my starting point. That's my commitment. So I would encourage each of us to think through, if this is something that God seems to be stirring in your life, to develop a specific plan for how you're going to start this and implement this. So don't let it be vague and a great idea, but let it be specific, practical, implementable, and maybe even held accountable. Right? Thoughts, comments, questions, people's other perspectives? We've got about 5 minutes or so.
In my experience, my journal has been such a great friend, holding my overload. You know, when I'm just feeling so overwhelmed, it's hard to breathe. And I'll just get out my journal and I put myself in the middle and just all these spokes. And it's just all those things that are just on my mind. So it's a clearing of the mind process.
That's great. That's
and
great.
It is amazing how that just seems to lighten my load. I put it out there for God, to keep working, and this is what is weighing me down.
So in case anybody couldn't hear, it's this sense of when life's overloading and you can't keep and contain it all, this is an emptying place for some of those things that then lets there be some personal freedom, and then you can see it and start to process it. And so it's a way to get unstuck or unparalyzed when overloaded. Is that fair?
Yes.
I would say kind of the same thing, but mine is to let things down. Like if I'm carrying around something that seems too heavy and I write it down and I hand it over to God, it helps me set it down.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's have everybody pull out your journals again. And I'm going Eugenia got me right off the bat. I tricked you right at the start into feeling like you guys are now expert, experienced journalers. So let's just wrap up this session by having each of you write a sentence or two about takeaways or thoughts or reflections on this last 45 minutes.
One thing I found really helpful is hearing and then believing that there is no right or wrong way.
There is no right or wrong way, absolutely.
Let me pray for us. Lord God, thank you for the gift of relationship with you. And Lord, I pray to the degree that this is a tool that would help us grow in depth and intimacy and understand your love for us and grow in closeness with you, help us to use it. And to the degree that this tool isn't something we need now, give us the grace to let it go and not have a sense of guilt. So help each of us to respond to you as you would lead and prompt in our lives in whatever ways would draw us close to you. Amen. I'm going to go lock my journal in my office. So don't look for it during church.
Thank you, Rich. Thank you. Also, just our next week's, oh, I guess it's not up there. Oh, there we go. Hope you can join. I think it's fine. Okay, hope you can join next week when we'll be looking at listening to the Spirit. And I think that is Juanita and Dale Ryan who'll be speaking then. So I hope you can join us. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
It's already done. It's already time to send it.
Oh,
It's Rich.